On this episode of the show, I have with me Taofeek Rabiu. He is the VP of Engineering at Etsy, and we're going to be talking about being a people leader versus being a people manager. And we're going to talk about what the differences are, building trust, building support, and showing vulnerability. And do we sometimes confuse the two? And we'll see some examples and stories as well. I'm super excited to have you on the show, and appreciate the time.
Oh, man. I'm excited to be here as well, Amir. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Before we start, I am pretty confident everyone knows what Etsy does, but just in case, could you tell us what you guys do?
Okay. So Etsy is in the business of keeping commerce human. So what we mean by that is we connect sellers, independent sellers, with buyers. And those sellers typically have one-of-a-kind special goods that we curate in our marketplace. And we facilitate the exchange between the two via the tools that we have, via our search and discovery features, via so many offerings that we have on Etsy. And that's what we do as a marketplace.
Awesome. All right. So I love it. I am a user and buyer on the marketplace. This episode, we're going to be talking about really the difference between when someone's a manager and someone's a leader. And I think sometimes we don't give this enough attention because we just assume the leader and manager are one and the same. I guess let's maybe start out with some definitions. When we talk about people leaders and people managers, could you maybe help us draw the distinction between what those two things mean?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll give you my perspective first. I imagine there's much more succinct definitions out elsewhere. But my view is that as people manager, you're doing things like, performance management, perhaps. How are you growing in your career? Where are you from an assessment standpoint? Doing things like timesheets and those things. Those are essential things, let's just say, right? These are the mechanics of managing people, keeping them organized, thinking about your org structure. How are we marching towards an outcome? Now, when you shift to people leadership, there's a distinction here because you have humans that we're managing, right? Not cattle, not processes, but humans. And humans require a level of care that is the difference between people management and people leadership. So what do I mean by like a level of care? So as leaders, it doesn't necessarily require a reporting relationship. It's a relationship more than anything. And that's a relationship built on trust, built on a shared level of understanding, built on a sense that I'm here to help you in some way, or as someone who looks to a leader, I'm entrusting you to lead, to help me understand things, to empathize with the challenges that I have so I can be better. And when we do that at scale, then we're allowing a lot of people to be better for the organization that they're a part of. So it's that level of what does it mean to be human in the enterprise of people for an organization, if you will. And it doesn't necessarily require a reporting relationship. So we often like to think of people leadership being solely in the domain of folks with manager, director, etc. titles. But I do fundamentally believe that at the IC level, it is there as well. So you have technical leadership, and that is just as important in my mind to the other kind that we typically hear.
Absolutely. I guess and I actually like the fact that you mentioned you can have leadership without having a management title. I think that's something that doesn't get spoken about a lot. And I think we talk to people talk about, grabbing opportunities when they can. They talk about empowering employees. They talk a lot about the things that you want to instill for people to gravitate towards leadership. I guess creating an environment so that people do feel comfortable, and it could be a manager who wants to, be a leader of people, or it could be, like you said, an individual contributor who wants to be in a more leadership-oriented role. I guess when it comes to the environment to kind of foster that type of environment to go, hey, you know what, it's okay to want to be a leader. It's okay to aspire to be a leader, and here are the things that you would need to do to be put in that position. I don't think that's always clear for people.
Yes. So if we were to talk about, what but sets up an environment for leadership. So one, it's first talking about the distinction, or at least the understanding that people leadership isn't solely in the domain of people managers, right? So we can be leaders even in deeply technical areas. I have no reports, but there are people who likely look up to you. There are perhaps a lot of people that you're mentoring. Perhaps your influence extends beyond just your squad. There are people who look to you for guidance. There's people who perhaps are looking for you to model what's the right way to do things. And that these are the elements of leadership that perhaps we don't talk about at the IC level. So to your question of what fosters that, I think it needs to be modeled from above, and we need to talk a little bit more around the expectations that we have of leadership. So fortunately, and I want to be a shill for Etsy, we do codify that in our career ladder. When we talk about promotions, when we talk about moving people through their roles, there is an expectation that you are a leader, even as an IC. We talk about how have you mentored folks on your teams as we evaluate you moving up. What kind of impact are you having in terms of how others underneath you have grown? These are all elements in my mind of leadership. And the folks who can do that effectively are rewarded by moving up. And we do have that expectation of leadership skills in higher levels.
Absolutely. I love that. And I guess when you're looking at that, is there a balance in that environment of allowing people to grow into leadership roles, but also on the flip side, there needs to be a certain level of accountability? I mean, it's this very maybe delicate balance of, we want you to take chances, but also you're also accountable. And that little line sometimes is hard for people when they are looking to do things that put them in leadership roles, right? Sometimes you're going to put yourself in a position where you might not succeed, but not necessarily a bad thing if the org is set up correctly.
Yeah, of course. Listen. We're not all born capable in anything that we do. We need coaches. I need a coach. I love my coach, and I'm going to shout out a coach that has helped me through a lot of these things, like John Williams. He's fantastic. I consider him less a coach, more a sparring partner. And if he hears this, he's going to chuckle or spit out his coffee. But the organization needs to support the growth of leaders, right? So it's not. I wouldn't expect it to be an automatic thing in which, hey, you're just going to do great as a perceived people leader. No, you need to understand how to have tough conversations with folks in an empathetic yet, what do we call it? High standards, humanity and high standards, yes, right? So you express a level of humanity, right, and empathy and connection, and you push people into higher standards, and you got to learn that. And it's not like a manager I had, Grant English, he said, no, management is a thing that you have to learn. And I would say the same thing about leadership. You got to learn it. You got to practice it. And the notion of accountability is important because it means that the way you show up is important. The way and the impact that you have for the teams or the people around you is important. And you need to be mindful of how you show up, how you're guiding, and the impact that you're having around you. And that's why people leadership is important, because it becomes about the footprint that you have in your ecosystem and the contributions you're making to the ecosystem. And it's not just for altruistic reasons, it's because if we look at it from an ecosystem standpoint, then you're pushing the ecosystem forward in some meaningful ways. And it can have negative effects, poor people leadership, even at the IC level.
When you're looking at somebody who's, I guess, misunderstanding their manager role, right? They think it's more managing process, managing the day-to-day, the nuts and bolts, less on this leadership component we're talking about. Obviously we can go into that a little bit more, but if somebody's misconstruing that, how do you help them see that, first of all? I mean, you're a leader, obviously. I'm sure people manager someplace has a leader. Is it something you pull them aside during a one-on-one? Is it something where is it time and moment? Is it something you watch for, and at some point you're like, I've seen this, a bit of a repetitive situation I need to step in?
Mm-hmm. Well, what you're describing is just feedback in general. That's something that's not necessarily in the domain of leadership. Like if you're in the people manager realm and you're in the job of care and feeding of humans, you do need to give them feedback. You need to be a coach. You need to tell them like, hey, here's where I see you're able to make the impact that you want, and here's what's holding you back from making that impact, right? So that needs to be a continual thing. It needs to be in the moment. It needs to be contextual. You need to be specific, all of that. But if we're to hone in on leadership, like, so what are the signs that we see when it's not actually happening and you're just focused on the mechanics? And it's subtle, and it starts from a lack of trust within your team. And you start to see that manifest in times of challenge, right? When there's a big reorg or a big shift in strategy, and when things aren't just kind of going, as predicted. Like, so what do you do? And how are people able to connect with you? And this is where you need to speak with conviction around, listen, here's how I'm showing up as a leader. Here's how I'm feeling. Here's what I'm seeing. How are you doing? Let's talk about how we're going to get through this. And then the idea of connecting with someone and being able to do that at scale in a team, I think, is what you start to see as the side effects of poor leadership. And if a team can't move through change, if a team can't rise to an occasion, if a team starts to cannibalize itself, they're not supporting each other. So new entrants to the team aren't able to grow because there's this notion of, yes, we all are here to grow and push each other. These are the smells, I guess, of poor leadership on a team. Maybe that's what I'm getting at, the smells of poor leadership.
No, that's fantastic. And, I think sometimes it's not easy to get that feedback, right? Because, you might have poor leadership skills, and, if that feedback is missing, you have a team that potentially is not living to their potential, not seeing, ideal environments to excel, and all of a sudden now there's questions of performance, and you have to identify where that issue is, and sometimes it's hard to see between team and manager and identify those, and you have to dive in and look deeper. When you do have people managers reporting into you, and you are going through your one-on-ones, you're collecting feedback, you're understanding how things are moving. If there's a situation where you see something not working well, I guess as somebody who's a VP of engineering, how do you deliver that feedback? Because telling somebody they're not good at people managing sometimes is maybe harder to take than if you said, hey, you're just not good at coding. Because it's less personal. It's like, that's a hard skill I don't have. You're telling me I'm not, all these other things. I don't know how to build trust well. I'm empathetic. I'm a people leader.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So what I would look for, let's start for what are, I guess this is a continuation of so what are the smells, right? Mm-hmm. And how do you deliver the feedback on that? And usually, and so as a leader, you're doing skip levels and you're talking to others to understand how are they doing, what's happening. And if you foster a good enough environment of trust in that, then you'll get candid feedback, right? So that's one of the reasons why you show up as a leader in an authentic way, because then people will open up to you and give you higher fidelity signal as to what's happening. And you need to do that throughout the org so you can build a good mental picture. This is what's really happening outside of just maybe objectives are met or something like that, because those kinds of problems will sneak up on you and have a bigger impact, like attrition, like low morale, low performance, et cetera. All right. So if I'm seeing or hearing about, listen, I have concerns, so it might pan out. I have concerns about what we're doing, but I don't believe I can bring it to my manager and talk, because when I do, it feels like they're going to reject it outright, and I don't feel comfortable having that conversation. So that right there is a sign of the leadership isn't where it needs to be, because you're not fostering an environment in which you can enter into discourse with your team. So the team doesn't trust you. You're not providing a safe, psychologically safe environment in which the team feels like they can course correct and flag things that they believe are going to lead to poor outcomes. All right. So my question there, and I've learned to start with and enter into these things with curiosity. Hey, how do you think things are going? What's your take on, let's say if someone flagged risk, what's your take on the risk, right? What have you heard from your team, right? What's the zeitgeist, right? What are you worried about? Okay, why? And what's the basis of that? And if I don't see or hear that you're drawing from your team so then that gives me confirmation that I see this is confirmation from a few folks that this is what's happening. And then I would poke and probe a little bit to go, listen, you really should consider talking to your team about this, because it doesn't sound like you've gotten good feedback from them around what the situation is or where the risks are. And then we have triangulated on, I see. So from your perspective, you would have said something along the lines of, I haven't heard, or, I haven't thought about talking to them, or something to that. As, this is how we guide people along points of realization. And the two come together. And that's how, you realize, like, what, this would be valuable. And the team then sees you doing that. And then it's like, okay, great, we've addressed that. So it's not just, hey, you're not doing this, go do it, right? So my job is to help bring you to that point of realization and unpack the reasoning as to why. And maybe I'll learn something along the lines and get a little more signal as to what's going on, because maybe there's more to it from your standpoint. And then that's where we engage. So in that, you see how I'm engaging with you to understand the problem. I've gotten some signal in my head, and I'm trying to kind of tease out and help you realize, like, hey, here's what we need to do together to get good outcomes.
Absolutely. I like that a lot. I guess when you are trying to build trust within the team, right? I think as a leader, you have to exhibit the right behaviors and characteristics so that people feel comfortable. I think trust is not always easy, because you're asking for people to trust you, and you've got to give that trust. I'm sure there's a lot of science to it that I do not know. But when we're talking about building trust and helping people feel comfortable, that trust itself, is that a top-down thing? Is it a bottom-up thing? Is it really mutually both people have to kind of move center to trust?
I would say it's incumbent on the top to build the trust, right? First and foremost, if I were going to say, like, where is it? Yeah, it is incumbent on the top. So I would put it on me. Like, I am responsible for building the environment and the conditions that foster trust, right? And as much as I may think I built it as approachable as I might think I am, then there are power dynamics that come to play that I have to actively work against in order to break down, any sort of barriers to building that trust. So that's another piece here. So to answer your question, it is incumbent on, like, the more senior you are to take that on as, here's your job to build trust. So I think there's a second part to this, right, Amir? Like, how do you go about building that trust?
Absolutely.
Okay. So from my standpoint, first, there's a level of vulnerability that's necessary to build trust. And this can come in the form of, I've entered a new space and I've read about this and I am endeavoring to understand this dynamic. What do you think, Amir? So here I'm inviting you into my thinking, and I'm giving you space to provide your point of view. I'm not going to say, what are you talking about? No, I need to listen. I need to actively listen. I need to be curious about the space. I need to demonstrate curiosity. I also need to demonstrate my competence. I've done the homework. I'm mapping my prior experience to even this new space. But I do want to bring you in so then you can feel like, oh, yes, I have a say as you're my elected representative. So therefore, I can push you in any one direction and give you a sense of what's important. So there's a little bit of, like, how much influence do I have on my leadership chain? So there's that. There's also a level of what's your say to do ratio. So in the course of this, if we decide, I'm going to follow up. And it sounds like you said something here, Mir, around there being a challenge in this area and we really should act on it. Like, I've heard this a few times now. So I need to do something about it. If I don't do anything about it, that's a breach of trust. If I do take active steps to put something in place, and not to say that you tell me to do something, I'm just going to do it, but you can see signs that I've internalized what you've said and now I can demonstrate action, then it's like, okay, so you will listen. I don't have to threaten you with leaving or get really mad. I can just tell you, this is what's on my mind. Here are my concerns. I listen to those concerns. We can talk about it. I invite you in, as I mentioned, but I do something about it and I demonstrate actual concrete action as a result. That also is another trust building bit. So say to do ratio and how you act on the things that you hear and also what you say no to. So it's not just accepting it. The inverse is also true. It's not just, I'm not trying to be a proponent of, well, if people say it, then you just do it. Like, no, if I disagree, I'm going to tell you, no, here's what I understand and here's why I disagree. And we can engage in discourse. Then it's like, oh, wow, I am being transparent around my thinking and I'm sharing my reasoning and rationale. So you have a basis to go, I accept it, or here's another bit of information for you to consider in how you're thinking about it. So it's really important to be transparent in your thinking because that builds conviction, and conviction is important when you're engaged with folks because then they have a sense of like, oh, there's a basis for what you're saying versus you're just plopping a label and being very directive here. So I know I've said a bunch of things, but I hope the point comes through.
No, I like that. I think that makes a lot of sense as well. And I know you had mentioned to me that you draw some inspiration from Simon Sinek, and
Yeah.
I was kind of curious if you kind of help us understand that a little bit.
Oh, you bet. All right. So the former CTO of Etsy, it's Rachna Kumar, she put me on a growth path to be a little more out front because my typical mode is very introverted. This is why it's my first podcast. And I like to lead from the back and be sort of an operator. And an opportunity came up for me to actually host Simon Sinek in a leadership series that we were doing at Etsy. And this was around people leadership, or just leadership. And one of the first things that Simon said was like, Tao, the first thing you all should change is instead of saying people managers, you should say people leaders. And that just stuck right in my head because it resonated very deeply with just some sensibilities that I had. And I was like, oh yeah, he's so right. And we went on to unpack leadership in the talk that he gave and talk deeply about it. And that was a pivotal moment because it was affirmation for what I kind of knew and sensed and believed, but there was some good language to put around that. And a lot of what he mentioned kind of bolstered and reinforced the notion of leadership, not management, but leadership. So it connected with some things that I knew, and we had a really, really productive chat. So that's where that inspiration comes from.
Awesome. I love that. I'm a big fan. So anytime you hear him pulling in some inspiration, it's probably a good one. I guess when you actually as a leader are sitting down with the person that you report to,
yeah,
and when you're actually going through your one-on-ones, right? I think sometimes people leaders are tricky people managers because their one-on-ones are reflective of the one-on-ones they had, right? It's a roll-up to bid.
Yeah.
Obviously, you could do a skip roll, but when you're sitting down and you're trying to better understand and get feedback and understand how you're doing, what are you looking for? What are you hoping to hear? What kind of feedback helps you? And I'm just kind of curious because we always talk about leadership and the feedback given, and I don't know if we shed a lot of light on what feedback a people leader is receiving from their manager.
Yeah. We all have blind spots. We're humans, right? And we do, as humans, try to act with a level of intentionality. Like, okay, given what I know and what I understand and the context that we're in, I'm going to endeavor to do this. And we're all, at the end of the day, trying to do the right thing. But what I'm looking for are the blind spots. So I'm going to articulate my assumptions of what I understand. And I'm really trying to suss out whether I've missed something or if I've got or if there's a different read on the situation, because then that helps me kind of round out like, oh, my understanding of the dynamics of the ecosystem that I'm responsible for. And that's kind of what I look for. And I seek that out from my managers. I seek that out from my manager, from my reports. And I like to enter into open-ended spaces to suss out my understanding of the domain, the dynamics. So I'll do AMAs, I'll do coffee chats, I'll do all of these ways to get signal. I have a colleague, Matt Holford, who says leadership is like we make low frequency, high signal decisions. Like we need very few decisions, but we require a lot of signal to kind of understand and map the terrain correctly. And the more diverse signals that you're getting, the better decisions, in my opinion, that you will make as a leader. So that's kind of what needs to happen.
Fantastic. I love the episode. Taofeek, thank you for taking the time to share with us. If someone does have a follow-up question, I know we touched a lot of different areas, and surely it spurred more questions than questions I was able to get through. But if somebody does have a follow-up, what's a good way of connecting with you?
LinkedIn is best. I've been a little more diligent about going through my LinkedIn, and I think that's the best way to get a hold of me, and I do try to respond now.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Well, definitely we'll direct people there. And again, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing.
Oh, no, thank you, Amir. This is fantastic.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for this episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think Taofeek did a great job of talking to us about people leadership versus managing people, and that distinction between them, how you build trust, how you actually receive feedback, how you like to give feedback. We covered a lot of different areas, so I thought it was a great episode. If somebody is interested in learning more about becoming a better engineering leader, this is one for you. And please share this episode with others who might benefit. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.